We would like to have our first conversation. So we've had many different aspects. Maybe I could just to start things off. We've had many things which were connecting the various micro, meso, and macro levels, the state, the organization, the individual. Is there anything you would like to comment on from what the others have been saying, just to start us off? And then I would ask you just to continue without me always asking questions.
Maybe the impression I get that maybe I'm in a wrong university, but in the Nordic countries we are not so negative towards internet and Google and different things. So we take such things as given and use, and in a positive way try to get value added out of the environment we are in. So in a way this kind of discussion is a little bit new for me, because I don't see this criticisms towards internet so much in the Nordic countries. I think I have followed up discussions in all Nordic countries, and you are maybe more sensitive to these things here in Central Europe and US. So this is my first impression. We are approaching these things maybe a little bit different in the north part of Europe.
Who would like to pick up on that? I think Richard?
Yeah, the presentation that I suggested, and I think Catarina, I won't put words in your mouth, but is not to overwhelm this with negativity.
No.
Yeah, but is to look at what are some of the fundamentals and recognize that. Again, I mean, my bias is that we're very early in this, that we may actually be moving in a direction we don't want to go. And it may not be for, and this is the important thing, even though I emphasized the few and you emphasized sort of more of a criminal component or orientation, that this is also coming just from our own behavioral context. So, I was interested in Dr. Lovink's point about, you said the recommendation economy, yeah? So that as we interface with we move to sort of the social and Facebook modality, that we start to not rely on experts, as Andrew said last night, but we sort of recognize we're going to get recommendations from friends. But then Dr. Rowlands suggested to us that lots of younger people, but cross-generationally, they see Google as a friend, right? They've personified, and I thought that was an interesting link between the two, because last night Andrew suggested sort of a movement, right, from the Google age to the social age, and my customizer category suggests maybe that's a bit blurred, yeah, because if we see Google, the digital generation doesn't see Google as a service provider, a provider of service, right? But something that's more personal, something that's more that we interface on a regular basis, and it doesn't have to be malignant, right? It just is, this is the way it is. And that's where we may rely on our recommendations. But what jumped out at me with Lovink's point was, that Google's still a commercial entity. It's an advertising firm. If we think about it in that context, it has a mission to make money. Again, that's not a bad thing, but we have to be conscious of the dynamics of someone thinking about this purely as a friend, relying on it for recommendations. We become a lot less self-critical. We don't become analytical. Do we become open and manipulable to the few?
Geert Lovink, I think you are being asked, or do you want to directly?
I just want to comment one thing. For example, this Google Earth taking pictures of the streets and so on. There are many distant places in Finland that their local newspapers are making stories. Why didn't Google take pictures of our streets? Why are we not included? So they fear that they are being left out of the development. So this is showing how positive they are towards Google. So why didn't they take pictures of us? That's the big trouble for many.
But also for economic reasons very often.
Yes, I guess there is this economic...
Because if they want you to find your hotel or go on holiday to a certain place, then of course...
then you are not in.
Google Earth. Yeah, sure. Would you like to comment on what Richard has been saying to you?
Yes, sure. But after that, I would also like to ask a question, of course. I'm not known, to be a big promoter of European pessimism, but yes, I do enjoy the great energy sources that come from radical negative critique, and that I consider as a really also a genuine European source of creativity, which is quite unlike maybe the northern countries. I don't know. Maybe this source of energy is known in the US. For some, maybe not all of them. Maybe it's banned on the West Coast. I don't know, but it is a powerful source if we're talking about collaborative and collective production of new concepts, because this is in the end what it is about, because this is what drives the IT industry, this is what drives networking. How do we develop new concepts? Yeah, and this is coming just out of the blue by being positive, by just following what a very limited amount of American companies are offering us, or do we look to ourselves and ask ourselves, do we have some ideas of our own as well? And that should not, translate in some kind of anti-Americanism or something like that. I'm really very, very far away from that. It just, poses the question on the table, what type of, let's say, network society, as Manuel Castells coined it, do we want? Yeah, are we also designers, or are we just customers in that respect?
Exactly.
But my question:
can we also ourselves
think up something? Ourselves. And where do these ideas then come from? But my question goes to the second part after I did my presentation, which. I want to come up here at least with a classic hacker perspective, and saying that I understand the worries very much and I share them. But if I look in the Netherlands, the implementation of all these new laws just leads already to quite a strict new regime of laws. And implementation, and also convictions, maybe not so much in the field of cyberbullying, because that I'm quite interested in because I can see that there's not much legislation happening at that level. But certainly, I can tell you, I had a meeting not long ago at the Ministry of Justice in the Department of Terrorism, where which is very interesting that the anti-terrorism squads are dealing with internet, and they told us, group gathered there, that already last year, they caught 1,100 young people in the Netherlands alone who directly threaded, post threats to politicians and celebrities. They went to the houses of these young people, arrested them in front of the parents, and really put a lot of pressure on these minors. Yeah. So what I have not heard in your story is that police and legislators are already very, very much engaged in active, let's say, confrontation of the practices that you have listed here.
Sorry, maybe in the Netherlands, maybe. But concerning cyberbullying, you will see that most of the incidents will not be presented because the children don't went to friends or don't went to the teachers or the parents. Nobody knows about these incidents. And that's because that's the
That's
thing.
why I'm saying cyberbullying. I understand because that's amongst young people, and it's outside of the view of authorities.
And that's the reason why we should inform people. I don't want to focus only on the bad things of the internet, because we have a lot of opportunities through the cyberspace. But to be responsible or to work responsible with the internet, we should know the risks and the bad things who should happen. And that's, I think, very important for the education. That's my opinion.
Maybe we can draw in the other speakers. I think we are probably agreed upon the good qualities of internet, that they are there, that we have to structure them, and that to do so, I think this is the main thing that's coming out here, is that we have to be informed, responsible citizens at different levels, and we have to analyze what is actually changing. And I think we sociologists always say when we have complex dynamics and complex things changing, we have intended change, which we have planned, we have hoped will go a certain way, and we have unintended change. And the tricky thing about unintended change is it can be positive and it can be very negative. So maybe we can draw, if I can draw you in, Ian, the question of, we were saying, if we're going to be responsible, we're going to have our analytic qualities. This is what you are saying, this is what you are saying, Richard. But if we're not having a young generation who is really going to read and to go into depth in certain things, is that going to really disrupt our analytical qualities in the long term? Or are we, which has also been said, are we just developing in the sort of the midst of developing new strategies of analysing in a different way?
Well, I very much agree with a comment that Richard made earlier on, which is he doesn't believe anything is new. And I think one of the things that we're trying to think through with our research is, okay, we're seeing kinds of behaviours which we can pin down to a millisecond. But we couldn't do this in the print era. And my suspicion is that we're just seeing an intensification, an amplification of things that were already happening. If you look at the desk of a typical scientist in the sort of pre-internet era, they were doing exactly the same things. They're scanning, they're browsing, and so on. But I suppose my contribution was very interesting where we came in on this, that there are national differences in the way that we're organising ourselves. And I think we've got to start, to an extent, we're prisoners of language. We've got to start talking about information societies, not the information society. And if we just think about post-war, just the variety and diversity of post-war industrial societies, we can see that we're not just really driven by technology. We've got to make choices, and we've got to start educating our young people in universities about the ethics of the kinds of issues that you were talking about, because we can make choices. And we've got to have a view. But I'm not actually that pessimistic about young people. I do feel that there is something, this power browsing phenomenon is actually humans reacting in quite a positive way, in a sensible way to information overload. And I think we're actually becoming quite smart.
Mm-hmm. Are we all agreed on this?
I can tell one example about this ethics and educating young people also. In Finnish universities we had internet ethics courses maybe 10 years ago, and it was under some discussion, but then the number of students dried down, and they said that we know those things already, it's nothing new, so they at least keep themselves as educated in the internet issues, so they don't want to discuss. No, nowadays we don't have those courses as there is no demand, but I really don't know how they get their knowledge, or are they knowledgeable, but really it's hard to get, say, students to IT ethics courses nowadays. It's a topic not drawing young people in Finland. I don't know why.
But we can say for Germany, what we can see, that the education for young people in internet ethics or so on should come from other young people. So the peer-to-peer education is a very important point. So if a teacher is standing in front and tells something about the risks and how they should behave on the internet, they always say, oh, this old guy, what he wants to tell him. So, but if it's a peer friend, or a guy who is not much older than the other children, so you have much more possibilities for the education. So that's what we should do in Germany. The education should have been done through peers.
May I take up on that and just ask the other nations sitting here, what kind of responsibility is put into actual politics at or policy at the level both of media competency? Is that really being taken up as an issue in the UK, Ian?
We had a discussion with the Minister for Education. Politicians don't understand media competency. They don't understand information literacy. And we've got a very, very crowded national curriculum anyway. There's another issue. I think
there are differences between England and Scotland, okay, but we'll not take up on that just now.
We'll save that for later.
Okay.
But it's also because things are so fluid. I mean, I remember seeing, this is a long time ago, a conference in the European Commission where Commissioner Bangerman stood up and said, we are not going to take a view on regulating e-commerce because we might just completely screw it. And so there's a very laissez-faire attitude towards regulation in the UK, and I think in parts of the Commission, because of the law of unintended consequences that you mentioned earlier on. Yeah. Just stand back.
The United States educational system is very decentralized, right down to the local level, and yet we've had a process of sort of centralizing curriculum through standardized testing and that type of format. But I think what's been missing in our approach to date is sort of we're playing catch up, right? Is that the internet is not a tool ultimately, and I think it's being approached in an educational sense as a tool, right? Is that we have to teach how to use it rather than understand it from an ethical standpoint. And say, this is just teaching about how one lives, right? So it's not a hammer, and there's not a proper use and a good use and I become efficient with my use of it, right? But I know not to hit somebody over the head with it, right? That's not knowing how to use it well. That's actually bringing an ethical construct into my holding of that device.
Okay. In the Netherlands, well, there is a program called Media Wisdom. It's quite big, and it indeed it's a national program, and it's running on many schools, and it's doing an okay job with that. But the discussion, the overall discussion, is really somewhat different, and that just deals with the let's say for those here, it's the PISA discussion on the performance of schools, and what happens if you start to disinvest in education over a longer period of time, which is happening in the Netherlands. There's less and less money available. And that money, by the way, is of course also has an effect on let's say computer skills overall. But of course, where you see it most clearly is in the lack of let's say language skills, writing, spelling, and so on. So if students now enter the polytechnic or a university, the first thing we need to do is to teach them how to write. Yeah. So there are writing courses really in the first year of university. Imagine, which deal with spelling and writing. Yeah, and this is what the real issue is about. And internet or not, this is really what is a huge concern, and that ultimately also translates into less and less money that is available for research, because this is a cascading effect that happens in society. So there's less and less money available for research, which, you know, in the overall effect then, you know, weakens Europe's position, you know, in the global economy. So I would put that that discussion about internet or not really in this perspective of how do we build up, you know, a competitive knowledge economy in Europe, really. Because the internet debate really by itself will not deliver a lot of, you know, deeper insights.
I think it's an important point you're taking up here, because we have a lot of literature and we talk a lot about the knowledge society, and of course with internet about the collaborative knowledge society, without maybe looking at really the earlier, the Google generation. Is it going to be a sustainable knowledge society? Or do we have, through the deficits which we are seeing in the Google society, or in the Google generation, are we going to have problems? You were talking about, Ian, about the problem with young men, especially not reading and not analyzing texts.
Yeah, but my point is really the decline, the rise of, let's say, of the Googleization and the use of social media and so on cannot compensate for you know, the drop in overall levels of education and ultimately the overall you know, investment in research, and this is this is the problem.
Mm-hmm. But I think it's both problems.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, not to get so negative, but what concerns me the most, right, is if we marry Dr. Lovink's point about sort of a decreasing capacity for analytical thinking and deep thinking with the dynamic that we're seeing on the web, which is actually a narrowing of perspective, right? I mean, to me, what's fascinating is that we have probably the greatest access to the widest swath of information that we've ever faced, and yet the filters that we are engaged in is in-group behavior, right? So the folks that we are sharing that information with are people who agree with us.
Yeah, it's what Clay Shirky calls, you know, filter failure.
So
that's exactly what we're facing.
And so if we marry that with an education system that's not providing us analytical skills, and we're quick about how we're doing this, and all we hear is the echoes of the folks that we have gotten into smaller chambers with, that's why I wake up at night worried about Lord of the Flies. You know.
I think my real concern about where we are at this point in time is a reflection of my daughter, who in one part of her school curriculum is taught about global warming, so the world's getting hotter. In another part of the curriculum, she's taught that the world is getting cooler because of all the particulate matter which reflects the sunlight back. And there's no, unfortunately, in the way that these things are taught, there's no synthesis. Mm-hmm. And what's deeply disturbing is when you talk to her or to her colleagues at school, they either totally believe in global warming, or they totally believe in global cooling, and it depends which newspaper their parents read. And we're now getting to a position where this kind of social networking fragmentation of people talking to themselves, we're now getting to a stage where you can take on belief systems and wear them as lifestyle accessories. We're losing a sense of synthesis, we're losing a sense of science, and it's terrifying.
Mm-hmm. So is this undermining the whole idea of demos? If we are only looking in the net to find opinions, or looking to our friends to reinforce the opinions we really have, does this not rather change the way of looking at the idea of the whole idea of demos and Freiheit and freedom in internet?
Yeah, I enjoyed Daniel's presentation so much last night, and one of the things that I looked at and I said, but he's so different. I mean, you know, how representative is he of, you know, sort of the cyberspace population? You know, someone who is that analytical, no, that wants actually to take the sources, you know, that reads the Guardian and the Financial Times, that does it. I think he represents a very, very small slice.
Well, not
and
in Germany. I would disagree. In Germany, I think that's so interesting of this country. There's an enormous amount of very well-educated engineers, right? And some of them are IT engineers. Some of these IT engineers call themselves hackers. But yes, I mean, if you go to the Chaos Computer Congress, in late December in Berlin, you'll be amazed. It's 5,000 people, very, very highly educated, critical people, like Daniel. And for me, he's a pretty average guy. I'm sorry, but no, he's done outstanding things. But I mean, that's how he. Just read his book. He will. He will last, exactly because he is now in such an opposition to, Julian Assange, who has created himself as a kind of pop star celebrity person. Daniel is the exact opposite.
There is one concept I would like to add to the discussion. We have this fragmentation of the society, also people with same opinions and ways of looking at things discuss with each other, and within this community, they develop issues and things, and no one takes a look outside this fragmented small world. What I have recently heard is one more concept I would like to take the discussion. It's the concept of long tail. Also, marketing literature has taken up that during the last 5-6 years, also during internet time. Now people in marketing, in business have started to see that actually the demand for things is very much bigger than they expect. Also, we are not having the normal Gaussian demand, but we have a lot of demand for extra things, peculiar things. And internet can be a place where you can get those things too. So in a way, I'm telling that business and people have understood that even though the internet seems to concentrate things on a few places, on a few makeup sites and so on, actually the demand for, say, cultural goods too is very broad actually, and I think there is a kind of wake up now that we should deliver things on the edge of interest to people, and internet could be a platform for that too, but this long tail phenomenon is very interesting. Take a look at the internet, take a Google and key in long tail, you learn about this.
I would perhaps, just as a last point that I'd like to bring in, I'd like to ask you, we've been talking about some of the very negative aspects, dumbing down, and maybe we can talk about the different things which are happening at the same time. If we look at the co-evolution of science and society, I think a big issue which, before the internet age, Helga Novotny and others have been talking about, and which has suddenly been given a huge new horizon with internet as a platform where experts, and we talked about last night about the problem with Andrew Keen about the problem of losing the experts, but at the same time we are also connecting experts through the internet. Is there something you would like to say on that point, which I think is a huge potential of internet, and also not just experts in the narrow sense of the word, whether it's the scientist sitting in a university or a production engineer sitting in a company. We are certainly broadening the scope and the possibility of connectivity of experts, and widening also what we mean by an expert. And at the same time, at the other end of the scale, we have maybe still have the flattening out of knowledge. Who would like to comment?
I would comment on this real-time economy I had in my presentation. Also, it means as well real-time science. Also, in the past, producing a book or a esteemed article in a good journal, it could take 2, 3, 4 years. And now you can publish your results of the science in 2 days, internet or instantly. So the cycle of development is getting very much faster. And I think this is very good for the science. At least this real-time science is one phenomenon we are seeing that is good for science.
I would add the same, because you can combine the research about thousands of researchers. You can know everybody, and you can make it very fast to do research together. You don't have to search years and years, and you know what people in the United States or in Canada are doing at the moment, especially in my field. What are people in the research about cyberbullying are doing in the Netherlands or in the US or in Canada or Wales or in the United Kingdom. So, and we can come together and we can do our research together. And that's, I think it's a real big and huge opportunity for the future, because then we will go faster and faster to also the new things.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think there's no doubt that it's an amazing collaborative process and tool. And I think, to pick up on Ian's point about being optimistic about the future generations, right? From a scientific standpoint, when my daughter picked up a video game, if most of us, if we wanted to try something new, what did we do? I went and looked at the instruction book, right? And I would spend time going, press A button, B button, it does this or that. And what do these kids do? They get up and they just start playing it, right? But, and what happens? They experiment, right? And what they do is they fail, they take that information in, they assess that, and they go on a different path. They don't engage in the same path, they try to seek a different path, which is what we as scientists do all the time, right? We learn from failure. And we engage in that process. So it'll be interesting to see, this sort of default to an experimental problem. The only danger I see in that is that they rely on a reset button, right, to get them out of trouble, right? And we don't always have the reset button, available. So I think we also have to be not so negative about these leveraging the collaborative stuff. In terms of how, in fact, not just us using it, but this future generation being able to collaborate, cut and paste. In our mindset, that's plagiarism. If I just cut and paste and don't give somebody credit for it. In the digital native's mind, that's another word for collaboration. I just taken somebody's idea, built on it, and run with it. And so I think we have to be a little flexible in thinking that through.
I think there's one very positive aspect about immediate access to information, cut and paste, and all the rest of it, which is, I was talking to an historian last week, and he said he'd done his PhD in 1960. And he said to collect the information that he collected for that PhD then, he could have finished it in 18 months instead of the 4 years. And the point he was making was that in some of the arts and humanities subjects, the impact of all this collaborative work has speeded up research. Access to information is now not the barrier it was, and so PhDs are having to ask different, broader scoped questions. So the nature of inquiry is changing as we surf this massive wave. It's very interesting.
Okay, well, yeah, that's all seen from the perspective of the individual scholars that collaborate. We have one big problem still there, and that's the publishing outlets, the journals and publishing houses, who are still, very, very slow. And who are also very hesitant to change, to give up basically copyright and to embrace open access principles. This is a huge fight that is happening as we speak, and eventually the publishing houses who are now still in control of most of the, let's say, influential journals, and the careers of individual scholars depend on that. And we need to break out of that vicious circle. But I just want to say that, organizing yourself is okay, but I think we are now a little bit more humble about the question, okay, if you organize yourself, the rest will just follow by itself. the question, was raised, and the critique of all that stuff on the political level is you can read in Eugene Morozov's book, The Net Delusion, and it's a really good book. I can highly recommend you, because he kind of really deconstructs the cyber hype about political organization on the net, and also the events in Egypt show that it's very good to organize this stuff in a very early stage, but after that things really take over and develop a whole other dynamic, and we should not think that the whole world up onto the level of the revolution itself will be guided along internet principles.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we'll just discontinue our conversation at this point of time in this round. I wouldn't want to have a facet, but I think maybe we can say, we are really quite positive, especially if we realize what criticism means. Criticism means being positive to do things better, and I think that sounds so simple, but very often criticism is mixed up with being culturally pessimistic, and I don't think any of us sitting here are culturally pessimistic, but I hope we are critical, responsible citizens. Yes, thank you very much.